Technologist with Expedient. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about hardware refreshes and whether or not you should do another one. For those of you who are new to Expedient, we were founded, or sorry, not for those of you who are new to Expedient, for a quick housekeeping note. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A panel. That helps us keep track of the questions, make sure they get answered. Our VP of Pre-Sales Engineering, Rob McCafferty, is on today to help answer your questions, and he and I will do some additional Q&A after the session. If you ask a question, you're entered to win a prize. The prize this week is a Nespresso Virtual Plus Deluxe. That is an espresso maker. It's warm drink season. So get your questions in. You'll be entered to win that. And all of this is being recorded. So if you have to step away or you want to show something to somebody else who couldn't make it, this will all be recorded. It'll be on our website, go.expedient.com/webinar replays. It'll be on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/expedient. It'll be on our Instagram @_expedient, and you'll get a link in an email. Now, for those of you who are new to Expedient, we were founded in 2001. We started as a co-location company, moved into managed services, and are now in cloud. We have cloud locations US East, Central, and West. Our West region just opened at the end of 2019, so it's coming up on its very first birthday. And we have international cloud deployments on customer sites in Australia, Germany, and Canada. So if our cloud locations don't work, we can bring that cloud to you. And that applies domestically as well. We're a VMware cloud partner and have been since 2007. We have 45,000 virtual machines on our platform. So we've been running VMware solutions at scale for a very long time. When we talk about the concept of hardware refreshes, we kind of have to talk about timelines first. And understanding where these timelines come from and what makes them important kind of goes a long way into understanding the needs for a hardware refresh and how we can make our hardware refreshes simpler. The first is support. And support timelines are the ones that we generally think about when we think about making a big hardware refresh. Servers are purchased with 3 to 4 years of support. And so at the end of year 3 or the end of year 4, decisions are made, preferably earlier, on what to do about replacing that hardware. Do we extend the support by another year because there's cash flow issues? I've definitely heard from friends in the industry that all of the COVID things that are happening have largely created a number of push situations to say, you know what, we're not entirely sure where the business is right now, so we'll just bump support out by a year and we'll see where we are in 12 months. The other are, once we start to get into the age of hardware and you continue to do that support year push out, you can run into challenges where the actual hardware that you're trying to put extra support on is no longer supported by the vendor. You have to go to very expensive third-party services, and that can become an even deeper challenge and a bigger push to a larger hardware refresh. Another one is purchasing. From a purchasing standpoint, we have two different models, right? We have the purchasing of buying a physical item like a server, right? You pay $10,000, you pay it all up front, you do depreciation for the next 3 to 4 years, depending on how your business wants to handle that. And then you either replace it or you keep it and keep running workloads on that hardware. The other option is leasing. And leasing has a couple benefits. One, it limits your upfront CapEx payout, right? You're buying this server and paying for it over the next 4 years, and you're given the opportunity to replace it at the end, or you can buy out the lease. But both of those set a fairly hard decision point. At the end of the lease, what are we doing? And so again, it turns into, do we want to do new research and new implementation and new training, or do we want to just keep going and just replace this with the exact same thing we had before? And finally, new technologies. If you're on a 3-year timeline on a traditional 3-tier architecture, you may be looking at something like hyperconverged infrastructure or hyperscale cloud or an enterprise cloud. How do I make my way into those technologies? The problem, though, is that new technologies need to line up with where you're ending your current hardware, or else you're either leaving money on the table or having to extend support contracts or something to get to that next level of technology. And the fun part is that the timelines across your various silos never line up, ever. You can try to make them line up. You can nudge support contracts out. You can maybe pull a compute purchase forward, but they'll never line up, and you're going to leave some sort of funds on the table. And so from a decision standpoint, what we try to help with is trying to figure out the best way to land this. And when you look at things like storage refreshes, that can start to cause issues down the line. I replaced my compute at the end of 2019. My storage is up for replacement at the end of 2020. I decide, you know what, I'm not going to make any big infrastructure changes because 2020 has been a year and a half. So I'm going to just refresh my storage and move forward with the same architecture. I've now signed up for another 3 years of this architecture, and all of the pain points that go with it are still there. And if I add in something like a storage expansion because of a big project at the end of 2021, I've now pushed this out even further. And so I can never really line everything up to make a big technology change to take advantage of new technologies as they come on. So when we start to look at these sorts of things and you look at a hardware platform, it's more than just hardware, software, and support. It's actually deeper than that. And when we look at something like hardware, hardware is actually made up of more or less 4 different pillars: compute, network storage, and data protection. And once we're inside of the hardware world, we run into interoperability challenges, especially in siloed organizations or mid to large size organizations. If I buy a storage array, the connectivity to that storage array now puts a prerequisite on my compute team. If I buy fiber channel storage, my compute needs to be able to support fiber channel. If I buy 40 gig networking, my hosts need to support 40 gig networking or 10 gig networking. If I decide to move to 25 gig on my next compute refresh, I can't because my network supports 40, not 25. And just juggling all of these various prerequisites and interoperability challenges is a huge time sink. And if I look at something like data protection, if I migrate all of my compute into a hyperconverged platform, how does that affect my ability to do disaster recovery or backups? If you're traditionally doing an array-based replication from point A to point B, how does that work with your compute side? Do you now need to buy double the compute or the hyperconverged compute on both sides in order to do that replication? That can be a huge challenge. And once we dig down into software, you're now into design constraints based on the way that licensing works to maximize the value of that licensing. So things like operating systems, Windows licensing, Red Hat licensing, those things can get very, very expensive. And so you don't necessarily want to mix the two together because you're going to not be able to maximize the amount of money you just spent on that Windows license. The same thing goes with virtualization. Do I want to spend a very small amount on virtualization licensing, say my VMware licensing, but then I have a big outage failure domain because I've got all of my eggs in very few baskets? Or do I want to scale that out and now I'm spending more money on my virtualization platform? Same thing goes for database. If any of you have ever tried to virtualize Oracle or SQL, you know what I'm talking about. That licensing model can get very, very expensive very, very quickly, especially if you try to shove your database servers into your general population cluster. And now Oracle would like you to license all 12 hosts in that cluster when you didn't have the licensing money for that. So all of those licensing constraints can come into play as well. And when we dive into support, there's an FTE burden to supporting all of this. There's research time that goes into figuring out what compute platform, what network platform, what storage platform, what data protection platforms, all of my OS virtualization and database. How do I implement all of that? How do I make sure that all of my staff is trained to be able to support that going forward? Because in the end, it's not just supporting the individual pieces, it's all of the stuff that goes around it. And this is very overwhelming. And I've been in this situation, I'm sure you have as well, where you've had to deal with all of these various pieces. And these are all the things that eat your time and cause you to not be able to focus on the things that actually can make a difference to the business. OS patching is incredibly important, but it's also incredibly time consuming. Same thing with firmware on the compute side, network maintenance, upgrading switches, code upgrades on switches, making sure that from a firewall standpoint that all of those rules are in place, or how do I make sure that my traffic is flowing properly? All of these sorts of pieces go around it. And you may be saying to yourself, you know what, this is really overwhelming. I want to simplify my infrastructure. I'm going to move to a hyperconverged model. And what ends up happening is it does simplify some things from a management standpoint, but really what you've done is just moved a couple things over to the compute side. Your file and block storage now come out of the hyperconverged platform. Your replication now comes out of that platform. And how does that play into disaster recovery where you're doubling everything that you're doing in here? I have to patch operating systems on both sides. I have to patch my firmware on both sides. I have to patch my VMware environment on both sides, because if I don't, I can run into challenges trying to recover. And you may be thinking to yourself, you know what? I can take this to a hyperscale cloud. That'll solve a lot of my problems. And what ends up happening is that it doesn't. It doesn't really make any change at all. It just changes the names that we put on the blocks. And when we do that, it's almost like a hyperscale cloud is really, really great at giving you a bunch of blocks, but it's still very much a DIY situation. I can go out and deploy VMs, but I still have to patch and maintain it. So they give me a bunch of blocks and I can kind of build a car, right? I can make this car look really as good as I can with the random blocks that I have, but it's not necessarily the fully best way to do it. It looks like a car, but it's not entirely a car. With a fully managed solution like an enterprise cloud, it's like getting a Lego set. This is supposed to be a Ferrari. It is a Ferrari. It looks like a Ferrari. And so what we're trying to build is the best and managed solution, and building it as an end-to-end solution instead of a bunch of blocks that you can go build whatever you want to yourself. And so when we look at this, we simplify this platform down. All of this is Expedient managed. From an enterprise cloud standpoint, there's no more buying compute or networking or storage and then trying to figure out all of the interoperability that goes with that. What you're buying is a resource pool of cloud resources, and you start to build all of that in. From a cloud data protection standpoint, you're not worried about buying your backup platform and checking the interoperability with the rest of the platform. And how am I going to do all this backup? How do I manage all the resources behind it? You just manage your backup jobs and you pay for the data that you're using. Same with push button DR. You don't worry about replication or the software that sits behind it and how that interops with your virtualization platform. You just configure your protection jobs and protect your applications. From an operating system and security standpoint, we have managed security and managed operating system services so that you can focus on the things that actually matter and not spend your Saturday nights patching and maintaining your platform. I want you to have a lovely Saturday night, maybe a lovely Friday night. Whenever your outage window is, I want that time to be yours and not sitting in front of your computer watching progress bars as things patch and then troubleshooting what happens when they don't. You get to eliminate that research and implementation time, and you get to focus on training on these platforms, but the translations of your skill sets comes right in. You don't have to learn a completely new nomenclature, completely new syntax, completely new design paradigm. You just come in and build on top of our platform. Your FTEs can now focus on the things that actually matter, the applications. They can focus on the business outcomes that can actually make a true difference. Because when you look at them side by side, it can be overwhelming on that traditional infrastructure side. All the things like licensing, operating system licensing, my FTE burden. How am I securing this platform? How am I making sure that this is built to best of breed? How do I take advantage of all of these services that I have? It's almost impossible because you have to spend all of the time building everything out as it sits. And even when you go to a hyperconverged platform, you're only eliminating some things. You're getting some nice, easy buttons on firmware patching, but you still have to do it. You get some nice, easy buttons on building out file services, but you still have to do it. You have to still build out all of your networking and maintain all of that networking that goes with that. And you don't really gain anything other than you've kind of combined a couple pieces of the puzzle. From an Expedient Enterprise Cloud standpoint, we simplify all of that. And instead of having to deal with all the individual pieces, you come in and you take advantage of a best of breed, fully built solution backed by a 24/7 support team. So you can call us and we can help you take care of that, from your operating system patching to your troubleshooting. And so when we look at this, we don't want you to ever have to think about a hardware refresh ever again. By eliminating those hardware refreshes, by eliminating all of the time that you spend on that, you can make this your last migration. You don't have to spend all of this time. Every time you do a migration, what goes into that? We bought the new hardware. It gets shipped, it gets racked, it gets cabled, it goes into the data center, the big shiny box. And trust me, I love new hardware day. New hardware day is the best. Big box comes in, you get to open it. It's like Christmas. But the new blinky lights that you just got is another 3 to 4 years worth of work for you. And so by bringing all of that in, just getting it in the door is a challenge. And then figuring out how you're going to get your stuff from point A to point B. How do I take my resources and get them migrated over without impacting my business? What value have you provided to the business here other than the hardware behind it is not going to die tomorrow? That's a limited resource That's a limited value that you're providing back to the business versus saying, hey, here's how we're going to rewrite our application so that you as the business can be more flexible and take advantage of a solution that's already built on the back end so you don't have to do this. You can also end the cycle of research and implementations. You don't have to spend all of that time. I know that's going through the speeds and feeds list and trying to figure out, whether or not this server or this software is going to be faster or better than this one, and trying to do POCs and doing all this training. It can take a lot of time off of your plate that you could be spending better on something else, whether that's automating your platform, providing more self-services, providing more capabilities back to the business, listening to what they need, and driving that forward. Because what we want to do is help you focus on the things that can truly make a difference to your business. If you don't want to think about hardware migrations anymore, if you don't want to do another hardware refresh and spend all of that time and energy, let's get in touch and let's talk. You can email me at aj.kuftic@expedient.com. You can also go to expedient.com/VMware-test-drive, and you could sign up for a 30-day trial. You get 128 gigs of RAM and a terabyte of storage and full portal access. That's API and UI access to the environment. So you can see what it's like to never have to think about a hardware migration again. You can come on a fully baked VMware platform, migrate your VMs in without any refactoring, and start moving forward and take advantage of the capabilities and the support staff that we have to take that burden off of you. And with that, I'm going to open it up to Rob. I see we've got a whole lot of questions out there. Rob, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. Thanks, AJ. Tried to answer a few of them in the chat, but left a few of them open to answer live. So we'll just kind of go right through the list. The first one that we wanted to address live was, do we offer a worksheet or a tool for cost calculations? And yeah, absolutely. On our website, there's a basic kind of TCO calculator that you can go out there and use. And then we have some assessment tools as well that our solution architect team can offer to help you kind of understand the costs of cloud versus a hardware refresh, and help you make that case to your leaders. So definitely engage with AJ or via our website, and we can help you out with that. The next one is more around specifically around SQL Server running on the Expedient platform, but we'll just kind of talk about applications in general. I think haven't come across too many applications that we don't have running on the platform: SQL, Oracle, DB2, all the major databases, all the healthcare applications, all the ERP type of applications. We have clients running all of those. There are some kind of client references out on our website. And then if we engage together and have an NDA, we can disclose obviously a lot more specifics around detailed client architectures and configurations.
I see the bring your own license model for Windows and SQL Server. So SQL is definitely one. From a Windows standpoint, our enterprise cloud actually has Windows licensing already. That's included in the cost of the virtual machine. So from a licensing standpoint, we're able to provide that back to you. So you don't have to worry about paying for a whole host license. You pay per VM for your Windows license. Same with VMware licensing. So you have per VM costs going into that. The applications licensing on top of that, whether that's as Rob mentioned, EMR, ERP systems, those sorts of things, that licensing is still at the per VM level. So you can still bring your own licensing for your own applications. But from an operating system and SQL Server license, you can procure those through us as well. So if you want to do SQL Server, you can. But from a Windows license and VMware license, that's per VM, and we provide that for you.
Yeah, and if you did just write that big check to Microsoft for your ELA, that's something that we can work with you with. Obviously, we don't want to make you pay for that stuff again. So we do have some options to allow you to even bring your own OS licensing.
And by the way, we do not fall under the ELA or EA changes that Microsoft made late last year around cloud. So you can bring some licenses to us and use the license mobility in your agreement. We do not fall underneath that. So that's actually another big benefit, kind of in that same vein of being able to have a little bit of mobility with costs that you've already paid for.
The next question's around, do we have the ability to kind of show mapping between applications and databases and containers? Yeah, and those are some products we're actually working on right now, being able to show from a network perspective as well as from a communication perspective, kind of what your application map looks like. The term microsegmentation has kind of been around for a really long time, and that's the ability to kind of restrict that communication. But what some of the tools weren't able to do was show you that picture. So we're in the process of building those. We have them on kind of the pre-sale side of things where we can do an assessment before you migrate to the cloud. And then we'll be building that out as part of the platform. So you have that always constant view of your application and communication. Competitors was kind of the next question. We can always get this one right. And I think one of the big mantras that we have inside of Expedient is, one cloud is not for everything. And making sure that we're running the right applications on the right cloud. So while we compete with AWS and Azure and Google and people refreshing their own hardware, we really don't look at it as competitors, but we look at it as options for different applications and helping you identify where to put different applications so that you're getting not only the best performance, but the best security and the best cost as well for each application. And really the key to that we can offer is tying that all together from a services perspective as well as from a networking perspective.
And that's actually one of the big things that we went back. So if you want to go to our website, go.expedient.com/webinar replays, it's actually a thing that we hit on in a presentation from 2 weeks ago, where we have a bigger view of what to do with your applications. Because even if you move to a hyperscale cloud tomorrow, your applications are still going to be what they are today. So we can help accelerate that. If you want to go to a hyperscale cloud, we can accelerate that cloud migration with a cloud operating model for your existing things, but then help you get your applications that you want to modernize or move into a hyperscale cloud model. We can help you do that as well. So there's a big change there from an overall cloud development standpoint, is how do we help you do that?
The next question is around how have we seen clients or potential customers change their decision-making process due to COVID, around being able to get hardware and having capacity and availability. So initially, when COVID hit, we had an influx of requests from our clients for additional capacity, right? They needed more RAM, more storage, more VPN connections, more just virtual desktops, all kinds of just stuff that happened really, really quickly. And we had capacity to meet those needs, and we're able to continue to build our capacity throughout, so that as supply chain started to slow down and our clients or potential clients couldn't get hardware, we had it. So we had inventory, we had capacity, and we were able to build not only expansions for our existing clients, but environments for new clients throughout the pandemic because of the way that we've built to scale and always have inventory available.
And I think that's a big thing. I've definitely heard from friends of mine in the industry where it wasn't so much that they couldn't get hardware. It was that the business said, we are actually not going to buy new hardware this year because we don't know what our cash flows are going to be. So we want to make sure that we are at least semi-protecting themselves. So we also saw that happen a lot where customers would say, you know what, we're actually going to hold off on any sort of major changes as part of this. So we've been able to help both ways, where we've had people who want to accelerate their cloud decisions to jump on board and actually accelerate the amount that they put into our cloud. But we've also heard from customers who, from a hardware refresh standpoint, they just got very nervous. I think the big change that comes out of that is that move to an OpEx model that can actually limit the amount of CapEx that you have to put out. So it can make decisions a little bit easier on the front end when you know you don't have to come up with 7 figures to be able to support this. You can come up with 4 or 5 figures over the course of 3 to 4 years. So I think it's actually a much easier sell back to your CFO, CIO in terms of how do you actually want to go do this and how do you want to operate your IT financially going forward.
Yeah. Next one in there is, what's the best way to upgrade your hardware? So I guess I'll just give the quick answer: don't.
Don't do that.
I think in most cases, right, moving those general type of workloads that can run on a cloud to the right cloud is the best choice. As AJ kind of mentioned in the presentation, right? Don't worry about those kind of hardware things. We kind of jokingly refer to it as mundane as a service, right? That's what we offer. All those things like failed drives and, oh, a DIM has failed and I've got to go in at 3 a.m. to replace a DIM and coordinate with a vendor to get the part and all that kind of stuff. That's not valuable to your business. That's not helping your business grow. So let us do those types of things, and so that you can focus on things that will provide value to the business. I think in one of AJ's presentations, if you watch some of the recordings, he talks about AC work and CF work, right? Where AC work is, if you do it well, you're going to get an A. If you do it poorly, you're still going to get a C, right? And those are those strategic initiative type of things that you're working on. The other side of it is CF work, and that's where we kind of see hardware and backups and all those kind of things. If you do it flawlessly, in the business's eyes, the best grade you're going to get is a C. But if you do it poorly, you're going to get an F, and that F doesn't stand for failure; it stands for fired, right? So, let us worry about those kind of things, and you worry about those strategic initiatives.
And I think the from a mundane as a service, it's almost like weekends and evenings as a service, right? Like all of the stuff that you would normally have to do off hours, normally have to spend that time on, you don't have to do that. So the ability to have that time back is both a benefit to the business because you don't have to deal with it. You're more refreshed. You can actually focus on things, but it's also a benefit to you. You actually can, hang out on the weekends instead of worrying about something failing. For budgeting, are there hidden costs that should be considered but not obvious? People time, by and far. Most people don't do a very good job of understanding the amount of time their people spend on maintaining their infrastructure and the cost that goes along with that. So if you have an employee that is spending 20 hours a week on that, you can consider the cost that they spend, or the amount of money that you're spending on maintaining your platform, is half of that person's, overall expense to the business, right? That's benefits, taxes, salary, everything. So if you can go through and figure out those pieces, you can actually find additional costs there that can be a cost savings, where you're taking that, and instead of spending it on that 20 hours being spent on what Rob and I call CF work, being able to spend that somewhere else, spending it on projects, spending it on automation, spending it on making the business happier. So you're not removing that work. That person still has plenty of work to do, but you're channeling their efforts elsewhere and letting someone else handle that mundane. I think that's the big one that most people miss, is that amount of time and effort that they spend on things.
A couple of questions, just to group them together, around cost and scalability and implementation services. So, a lot of the platform allows you to consume as you use it. And then we also are able to offer ongoing implementation services as you're adding and removing resources from the environment. And AJ also talked about kind of our 24/7 support as part of the presentation as well. So, we have technical folks ready to help you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I see here, is there a suggestion for newbies on the best approach to what data should or should not be for the first generation of cloud backup? Did you just close that? I was reading it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's all right. What should be considered for cloud backup and recovery approach, low risk, high value, to help sell the concept? I'm in the healthcare sector. So hello, fellow healthcare sector person. We have a number of healthcare customers. We have full HIPAA and high trust attestations. So from a data standpoint, your data will be secure when it lands on a cloud like Expedient. Your low risk, high value are things like archive data, things that the business doesn't need a ton of very quickly. You can get a lot of value out of moving that data out. But we also don't see any sort of real difference between your archive data, your live data, your backup data. It's all data to us. So if you want to bring that data to a platform and move it into a cloud, we have all the capabilities to provide all the security that you need and work with your business on how we can help them comply with all the various regimes that you have to comply with. I've seen SOC 1, SOC 2. We have both of those. We can attest to those. We have HIPAA and high trust as well. If you're in the healthcare sector and are at least semi-adjacent to government, we have NIST 853 attestations as well. So we can provide a lot of that compliance backend for healthcare environments or even governments. I see another question here that is this hosted only in the US for US government regulations? Our data centers right now are only in the US. Our international locations are all on customer sites. So they are specifically for those customers. Our cloud's mobile, so we can do that. But we can help you from a US standpoint. We can make sure that your data doesn't get magically replicated somewhere else. Our network and our data centers are all internal to the US. So if you're a US government customer, SLED, local, we can help with that as well.
Yep. I'm going to kind of group a handful of questions together as far as how you consume resources and services from Expedient. We try to make it as simple as possible. From a compute and storage perspective, you consume per gig of RAM, per gig of disk. Same thing with backups, data protection, DR, right? That as small of an increment as possible. That's what we break it down to, and we provide just a pool of resources, right, that you can consume and configure as your business evolves, and giving you kind of some of that flexibility. We don't force you into a t-shirt size VM. We allow you to size those VMs to the need of each application. Another one. Just trying to get close here to the end of some of them. How do we address seasonal surges, right? And yeah, we have tons of retail type customers that need additional resources here coming up for the last couple of months of the year. So giving flexibility not only from a hardware reservation perspective, but also from a licensing and consumption perspective, to allow our clients to add resources when they need them, and then kind of pull them back when they don't, and be billed on a consumption basis for most products and services that we offer.
What hardware refresh cycle has been implemented by Expedient for our own environment? So we build everything in pods. We have generations of pods right now. I believe, Rob, we're on our 8th and working on our 9th, or we've released the 9th, I think. But yep. Right now we have the pod design, and we build that out, and we build a number of them. And then once we decide, it's usually about every 2 years, we'll go back through and build a new design of the pod. There's usually new CPUs, faster drives, faster RAM, faster network connectivity. So we will go back through and start to bring those forward. So from your standpoint as a customer, the pods are on the back end, and they're not really something that you ever get to see. But we do offer those. We do have specs for those that if you're interested in learning about those, we can absolutely provide those. But for you as a customer, understanding just here's where my VMs live, how do I handle that? How do I use my resources is more important than the speeds and feeds on the back end, because it's just not exactly the most exciting thing in the world, really. What versions of SQL are supported? Basically anything that's supported by Microsoft, we support as well. So you can land, SQL 2019 on Windows Server 2019 on our hardware, on our platform. Our hardware doesn't have anything to really do with the SQL environment. But from our standpoint, we're on vSphere 6.7. So if you want to land your SQL data on our platform, it's just the same as any other VM on your environment as well.
Yeah, a quick question here about a trial or evaluation. I think AJ still has the link up there on the screen. You can go ahead and sign up for that right on our website. Question about implementation time. I guess that, obviously the classic answer, it depends. Right, we work with clients who have varying sizes of environments and varying complexities. So typically what happens once you agree to do business with Expedient, you're assigned a project manager as well as an implementation team consisting of system engineers, network engineers, migration folks, and they'll sit down with you to kind of work out a plan for implementation and migration based on the amount of data that you're bringing over, your business timelines, when your outages are, when your busy times are, all those kind of things. So a lot goes into the time that it takes to migrate, and a lot of that's driven by you, the customer, based on your business needs.
I see looking at DR, is this only supported by Zerto, VMware, Cohesity applications, or any support by storage replication? So we are still a colo provider. If you have a storage array that you happen to really like right now, or you're in that sort of realm of having to, you've got another 3 years on this array, you can put an array in our data center and replicate your data into it and sit that right next to our enterprise cloud. So we have the capability to be flexible with your physical needs along with your virtual needs. So if you want to do that, you can do storage replication to your own array. We also offer the ability to replicate from Zerto and Cohesity on-prem into us. The VMware platform is VMware Cloud Director Availability, which is a super simple deployment to replicate into us as well. So there's a number of different options that we can be flexible on how to handle disaster recovery. I do want to get one last thing in here. Rob Amstutz is the winner of the Nespresso Virtual Plus Deluxe. So congratulations to Rob. Enjoy all of those warm beverages.
Yeah, I'll hit one last question here before we wrap it up. The question specifically is about integration with ServiceNow, but we can address just integration with anything. So the platform has a fully open API that is documented by VMware, by Expedient. We provide you code samples. We provide a reference page to allow you to integrate our platform into any applications that you might have, from automation and orchestration to ticketing and support, all those types of things that you have going on.
And finally, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I think that's all of the questions. I want to thank you all for getting those questions in today. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Please go to expedient.com/about/events to see what that event is going to be. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
All right.